Today we're going to talk about graphs, making graphs from statistical data, because each of you, for your study, is going to have to create a graph. Now, there are two types of graphs that we're going to focus on. There's lots of different types of graphs out there, but we're going to focus on pie graphs or circle graphs and bar graphs. Okay, those are the two that we're going to focus on. There's lots of other ones that we can use, but for our questions, those two are going to be enough to get the job done. So, we need to be able to choose which one is best at which time. A pie graph or a circle graph. If we take a look at that example, okay, we don't really have to read too much into the question, but if we look at that example, it has 15%, 55%, and the last one is 30%. What do you notice about those percentages? What should you notice about those percentages, JD? They're different. They sum to 100%. That's the kind of information that we would use a pie chart to represent. So a pie chart or a circle chart is best for data that sums to 100%. Okay, so if we can break the data into percentages, and those percentages will sum to 100%, the pie chart is our best bet. Okay? And there are instances in which the data wouldn't sum to 100%. For instance, take a look around the room when I ask this question. Raise your hand if you have a dog. Raise your hand if your family has a cat. Raise your hand if your family has no pets. Okay, now if I looked at this data and I tried to sum it up into a pie chart, the problem is there are some families that have both a cat and a dog. So if I took those percentages and added them all together, I would have a percentage greater than 100%. And for that purpose, a pie chart wouldn't be the best case. Okay, we would have to use a bar graph or something else. But if I ask this question, raise your hand if you have siblings. Raise your hand if you do not have siblings. Okay, there is no overlap. You either have siblings or you don't have siblings. Those two percentages would sum to 100%, guaranteed. So when we're choosing which type of graph to use, we use a pie chart that's best if we have the data that sums to 100%. If we're trying to show percentages of a group. Now, how to make the pie chart? Well, first we obviously have to collect the data. So we assume that we have the data to represent. Then what we're going to do is find the decimal percentages for each group. Okay, so for each category, we'll find the decimal percentages. Remember, percentages are great to talk about. They're great for explaining things, but when we're going to actually do any math, we have to convert those to decimals. So we're going to start right away, find the decimal percentages for each group, for each category. Okay, then we need to find how big of a pie slice we need to make. So we need to think about what percentage of the circle that pie slice needs to represent. Well, how many degrees are in a full circle? Milius? 100% true, but how many degrees would that be? 360 degrees. Good. So to find the percentage of that 360 degrees, we have a percentage and the word of. What operation does that tell us we should do? Maddie? Multiplication. We're going to multiply the decimal by 360 degrees. Okay, and that will give us the central angle. Okay, that'll give us this angle at the center of the pie chart. How big that pie slice should be. It'll tell us what angle measure we should have. Okay, and we'll do that for each one of those decimals. Now, in order to draw the angles, we need a place to start from. So our starting line will be from the center to the top of the circle. Okay, and then using a protractor, draw the angles and label the slices. Okay? Now, what's up, Willow? That's basically what you're doing. She says, wouldn't you just be finding the radius? Yes, we're sketching a radius. We're sketching a vertical radius. In fact, it's a very simple way to say it. Starting line would be a vertical radius. Excellent. Well said. Now, be honest. If you're super comfortable and very confident in your ability to use a protractor to measure and draw angles, raise your hand. Okay. That's pretty much what I expected. So, let's do a quick crash course in how to draw angles and measure angles using a protractor. So let's start with this. Use your protractor to draw two lines that come together at a point. Okay, and it doesn't matter how you want to draw those lines, how big you want that angle to be. Yeah. Just use the straight edge side, anywhere on the paper, anywhere that you have some blank space. Okay, use the straight edge and draw two lines. Okay, then here's what I want you to do. I want you to take that protractor, okay, and on your protractor, I think on all of yours, it doesn't have this extra gap at the bottom. It just has the angle measures and then the 0 is at the very bottom edge. Am I right? The 0 is at the very bottom edge. Okay, so you don't have this extra gap that I have along the bottom. But what you do have is right here at the center, you have the crosshairs. You have the 0, 0. That's where your vertex needs to be. So when you move your protractor, okay, what you'll want to do, first you'll have to rotate it, and you'll want to put those crosshairs right at 0, 0, right at the center of the angle where your two lines come together. Okay? You'll also want to put this 0 line on one of the lines that you drew. Then you look along the outside, okay, and you think about where this second line comes. Well, this second line shows up, right for me, at right about 110 degrees. So this angle, bless you, this angle on my graph, or on my paper, is 110 degrees. Okay, and you can look at yours, and you can measure what angle yours would be as well. Okay? Now, here's what I want you to do now. Switch your paper with the person next to you. Okay, you can do a 3-person exchange if you need to, but switch your paper with the person next to you. And now, take your protractor, okay, and set your protractor on that person's angle. Okay, and measure it. Put your crosshairs right on that vertex. Make sure that your 0 line is on one of the sides. And check out the angle. Okay, well again, I straighten mine out a little bit. Okay, mine measures right about 110 degrees. Okay, and you can see what measures they have. Okay, you can get a good estimate of where their measures are. Okay? Everyone good on how to measure an angle with a protractor now? All right, give those papers back to the owners. And let's talk about analyzing this pie graph. So, first of all, let's read the story. So the pie chart at right shows the nutritional content of a popular energy bar by weight. The bar weighs 60 grams. Okay, then I have a chart. And from this chart, they created the pie graph. So we don't actually have to create the pie graph. I just want to show you guys how it's made. Now, I want to bring your attention to one thing. Your pie chart is the flip of mine. It's the reverse. It's flipped horizontally. If you take a look at yours, my carbs are on the right and your carbs are on the left. Okay, but it's the exact same graph. Okay, it's the same percentages, the same quantities. Okay? So, we have that 33 of those 60 grams are carbohydrates. So what we do is we take that 33 and we'll divide it by the 60 grams in the bar. Okay, and if we do 33 divided by 60, we should get 0.55. Then what they did is they took that 0.55 and they multiplied it by 360 degrees. And that told them that the angle measure for the carbohydrates should be 198 degrees. Okay, we'll measure that angle in a minute. Then let's look at the fats, the fat content. Okay, we have 18 grams of fat out of those 60 grams again. So take 18, divide it by 60, and you get 0.3. 30% of that bar is fat. So we take that 0.3, they multiply it by 360 degrees, and that gives them 108 degrees. Okay? Now, look at the protein. They measured 9 grams of protein in that bar. How do I determine that this is 0.15? How did they get that 0.15? Ryan? 9 divided by 60. Not the other way around. You're going to get a decimal. It's going to be less than 1. Take the quantity that you have divided by the total amount. So 9 divided by 60, and that gives us the 0.15. Then they took that 0.15, they multiplied it by 360 degrees. They're trying to find the percent of the entire circle, and they got 54 degrees. And that was the measure of the central angle for the protein section. Okay? Now, on mine, it's very easy for me to see the differences because I have the color. Unfortunately, with yours being grayscale, you can't see those differences super easily. So what I want you to do, guys, I want you to use the protractor to draw a straight line. Use the straight edge part to draw the lines nice and dark, and you can extend them beyond that circle so that you can really, really see each of those angles. Okay, draw them nice and dark so you can see them. And like I said, you can extend them beyond that circle even. In fact, I recommend that you extend them beyond the circle. Okay, now, let's take a look at how they drew those lines. So I'll take this protractor, I'll shrink down a little bit. Hopefully, there we go. Now, I'm going to measure the protein. So what we need to do is take our protractor over, set it on top of the graph. Okay, and I want you to make sure that that center, those crosshairs on that protractor, are at the center of your pie chart. They're where those lines come together. Now rotate the protractor so that your zero line is right on the line between protein and carbohydrates. Okay, make sure that your zero line is right between protein and carbs. Okay? And make sure that the crosshairs on that protractor are right there at the center of your pie chart. Now your pie chart is drawn just a little bit better than mine, so you should be able to see that when you measure it, okay, you should have this line coming out here, the line between the protein and the fats, should be right about 54. Whoever drew my graph didn't do a very good job, because it's not exactly 54 degrees. But if you look at yours, you should see this bar, this line, coming between the protein and the fats. Yours should be right about 54 degrees. Can you see that on yours? Okay, it should be pretty close, right? Okay, next, I want you to rotate the protractor again. Keep it in the same place. Keep the 0, 0, those crosshairs in the same place, but rotate it so that your 0 line is now between the protein and the fats. Okay, see how my 0 line is between the protein and the fats? That's where I'm starting from. That's my starting point. Now, I'm going to measure from here. Got to scroll down a bit. I'm going to measure that angle. Okay, and what I can see is that it goes from all the way down to about 120 degrees on mine. You know, like I said, whoever drew mine didn't do a very good job. But yours should be better. Yours should be right around 110 degrees. Okay, do you see that? Anybody not see it and point it out to you? Be honest. Don't be upset. Now's the part where we fix it. Okay, the good news is all of the angles are going to add up to 360 degrees. Okay, if we do this correctly, these should add up to 360, and they do. Okay, so if the 54 was good and the 108 was good, that means the 198 should also be a pretty good measurement. Okay, so we have those three different quantities, adding up to 360 degrees, adding up to 100%. That's how they created this graph. Okay, now we're going to take some information and we're going to make our own graph. So, scroll down a bit, if I can find the mouse. Okay, so we want to create a pie chart giving the students, based on the information about students in 8th grade selecting their language for next year. And we're going to say, for our purposes, that 8th grade has 80 students. We're also going to pretend that French is still an option. So, first thing I need to do from these data, is I need to find those decimal percentages. I have the number of students that are choosing each language. What I also need is that decimal percent. So how do I find that decimal percent for each of these? I'll divide each of those by 80. I'll divide the number in that class by the 80 students in the entire 8th grade. So 20 divide by 80, and I should get 0.25. If I do the same thing for German, 12 divided by 80, what do I get there? I do 12 divided by 80. What'd you get, Tyler? 0.15. Very good. Okay. How about for Spanish? What would I do for Spanish to find that percentage? What would I do to find that percentage of students planning on Spanish for next year? Logan, what are you doing? We do 48 divided by 80. And what do you get? 0.6. Now, those are the percentages, okay, the decimal percents. What we said we want to do is then take each of those decimals and multiply by 360. So if I take 0.25 and I multiply by 360 degrees, I'll get 90 degrees. Okay, we'll do the same thing for the German folks. 0.15 times 360 degrees. And what do we get? Someone I haven't heard from yet. Seth, what'd you get? 54 degrees. Okay. Then finally, we'll do the same thing for Spanish. Okay, and Mario, how will I find the angle measure for the Spanish crowd? 0.6 times 360 degrees. fix that. And Mario, what did you get when you did 0.6 times 360 degrees? I'm sorry, say again? Good, 216 degrees. Now, a way that we can double check to make sure that these numbers make sense is we add them all together. What should they sum to? What should they sum to, Willow? 360 degrees. Well, if I do 216 times 54, that'll give me 270. 270 plus 90 gives me 360. So we have good numbers. Next up, we want to make the pie chart. So the first thing that we need is a circle. Now, I'm going to cheat because I can. I have a tool that helps me draw a perfect circle. Okay, if you guys have to make a pie chart for your survey, I'll give you the compass that you can use. But right now, just sketch a reasonable circle, the best circle you can. Okay, and draw a point at its center. Okay, that's going to be your center point. Then draw a radius straight up from that center. Then we bring in the protractor. Okay, now set your protractor up so that the crosshairs are at 0, at that center, and have that 0 line on your radius. Now, I want to mark a 90-degree angle. So what I'll do is come over here, I'll look around the outside till I get to 90 degrees. And you find 90 degrees, and you make a little mark at 90 degrees. Okay, then we're going to use the straight edge side of the protractor to draw a line from the center out to our mark. Okay, and we're just going to use the straight edge side so that we can get a nice straight line. Okay, and we can mark that as the 25% who chose French. Okay, now we also want to mark the Germans. So, bring the protractor back over. Okay, except this time, we're going to go from the line, well, I would go from the line we just created, but I'm out of space. So I'm going to put it on the other side of that vertical radius. And I'm going to look around, I'm going to start from the 0, and I'll work my way over until I see 54. Well, 54 is right about here. So I make a little mark where 54 degrees is, and I swing the protractor around so that I can use the straight edge to draw the straightest line possible back to that center. Okay? And I can mark that as the 15% choosing German. Which means that this leftover section should be the 60% selecting Spanish. Okay, and if we want, we can get colorful and we can color those in. But for right now, this gets our point across. So, to make our pie chart, first we need a circle with a center. We need data. We take each of those selections, each of those choices from our data, and we'll divide them by the total amount in our sample, and that will give us the decimal percent. Then we take those decimals, multiply them by 360 degrees, and that gives us the angle measure. Then we use the protractor to draw those angles inside our pie chart, and then we label the sections. Okay?